winter day in a nice warm room with lots of red in the room. Welcome to the Christmas season. The church is decorated very nicely for this time of year. I wanted to say a special thank you to all of those who made that possible. As I was listening to the children's story this morning, I realized that I may have found a solution to a problem that I find from time to time. There are times when I cannot be here and someone else needs to speak, and I was thinking how great it would be to just have a parent. We just train him right, and whenever I can't be here, we just set him right up here, and then he just begins to speak. All fun aside, thank you very much, Jane, for that story. Last night, many of us stood in the rain. And I have never had so much fun standing in the rain. A smile on our faces, watching cars drive in and seeing them be able to listen to this amazing story. And I just want to say thank you once again to all of you who were willing to come out and stand in the rain so that people could drive through and hear that amazing story. Every year it amazes me just how many people will come together to make this possible. And so thank you once again for doing that. And tonight I do hope that you don't have to stand in the rain. Bring your smiles and lots of warm clothes, but hopefully tonight you will not need to stand in the rain. Last night there were a total of 84 cars that came through in roughly an hour and 15 minutes, containing 313 people. And some people did some higher math, and they discovered that if we kept that rotation going through all weekend, we could have about 4,000 people come through. And that's a lot more than previous years. So keep praying that the rain, God will hold that back, and we'll be able to get more people through that amazing experience. Again, please dress warm tonight, as I'm sure it will be cold. Have you ever wondered why it is that most all of us have an insatiable desire to make sense out of the events of our lives? Have you ever wondered why it is that we like things to fit? That we like the events that come into our lives to somehow seem to have a purpose? We say things like, wow, that was really random. And we're usually talking about someone that just walks into a conversation and they say something that doesn't seem to fit at all, and then they leave. And we always say that after they leave. We say this because it's odd. We say this because it's not something that we like to have as a part of our experience. Randomness is not something that most of us want the events of our life to be like. We don't want our life to line up as kind of this disconnected, random thing with all of these different events that we don't understand and that aren't working out the way we planned. We like things to line up in a way that we can see them and say, it makes sense, that there's a purpose to all of this. That's how we like life to be. Now, we think of things like this, and this is kind of how it would sound. We met because we were supposed to meet. And we like the sound of that. We got engaged because we were supposed to get engaged. And we like the sound of that. We got married, we got a great job, we had kids just like we planned. They went to great schools, retirement years were rich and they were full, and it happened just like we planned. There was a purpose to all of it, and it all fits together. That's how we like life to be. That's how we want life to be. We want it to fit. Now, we've crafted language around the world, and in various languages, we've crafted language as people to embody this desire that we have. See if you've ever heard or said things like this. Everything happens for a reason. You know this one well. And the question simply is, everything? Really, everything happens for a reason? And what reason is that? But we craft this language because that's how we want life to be. Another one, I don't believe in coincidence. Well, what do you believe in? I don't know. I just don't believe in coincidence. I believe in something else. I believe things have to have a purpose. There's some meaning to it. How about this one? I just haven't met the right person yet. But it's going to happen. It's going to come. I know I'm going to meet the right person at some point in life. It just hasn't happened yet. I guess it just wasn't meant to be. Really? We think that there's a great meant to be-er out there that just puts things together, and for some reason he decided that this just wasn't a good idea. So it just wasn't meant to be. And this one, this is one that people say when things didn't go so well for you. I guess that just didn't work out for you. I guess that just didn't work out for you. We craft these ideas, these things in language to help make sense because we want things to make sense. Now, why do we do this? What is it about us as human beings that does this? How many of you have pets? Okay, hands down, that's a good number of you. How many of you are cat people and are willing to admit it? Okay, there's a number of you. How many of you are dog people? Okay, that's a few more of you. That's pretty typical. Okay, so you have either a dog or a cat, and let's use dogs for an illustration this morning. How many of you think that your dog, on a random day, thinks, I am sure that the reason that my master is teaching me to stay is because it's going to enrich my experience for the rest of my dog life? Yeah. Or how about this one? I wonder if today's experience of playing fetch is really going to change my life in 5 years' time. I wonder if I'm going to learn something today from this experience of chasing this ball that is just going to enrich my life. How many of you think your pets wonder about things like this? Most of them don't wonder how this nap on this day is going to connect to the nap tomorrow, and then the nap next week, and then all of a sudden all of those naps are going to make sense one day. That's why I napped. Our pets don't think about these things, but we do. And there's a reason for why we do this. And as Christians, we have an answer for that. And the answer is kind of like this. Everyone was made in the image of God. I hope you believe that. And God is a purposeful God. He's not a random God. God sees the future, and He is active and involved in history. Your history, my history, the history of this world. He's actually involved making things connect. And God brings order out of chaos. He brings design into things that didn't seem to have it. And so today we're going to take a quick journey through the Christmas story. And we're going to look at this idea of randomness that seems to pervade our lives. And we're going to see from this Christmas story a really powerful example of how God is at work with purpose in our lives, even when it seems so random. Because I have a feeling that most all of you have experienced some really seemingly random things that you can't make sense of even today. And you just kind of wonder, is there any purpose in this? As we go through this Christmas story today, it's just a small portion of it. I hope that you will both meet your experience and you'll be encouraged through your experience. So if you brought a Bible with you, we're going to read from the book of Luke. Luke chapter 1. Luke chapter 1. We're going to begin, of course, in verse 1. We'll be alluding to some other places in the gospel narratives, the gospel accounts, but we're going to read directly from the Gospel of Luke. Luke is sitting down to write up an account of things that have happened in his lifetime and things that happen in a specific place. Luke is not sitting down to write out a fairy tale. Luke is actually setting down to write out things that happened in that first century. And I want you to listen to how this document, this ancient first century document begins, or read along with me. Luke chapter 1, verse 1. Many have undertaken to draw up an account of the things that have been fulfilled among us. First key word is many. Luke's not the only one writing this stuff down. This is not something that he just dreamed up one day as a novel to try and write down and get some publicity. He says, I'm one of many people who've sat down and actually written out the things that happened in this place at this time. Real things that happened among us. Verse 2, just as they were handed down to us by those who from the first were eyewitnesses. This is not all just hearsay. This is stuff that happened that people story to say, I was there, I saw it happen, I watched this take place. And Luke is interviewing these people to get the details of exactly what happened. Who were eyewitnesses and servants of the word. Verse 3, with this in mind, since I myself have carefully investigated everything from the beginning, I too decided to write an orderly account for you, most excellent Theophilus, so that you may know the certainty of the things you have been taught. Certainty that this is not random, that there's a purpose to all of this, and it really happened like this. It happened like this right here at this time. Now that sounds a lot different than this. Once upon a time in a land far away, in a hole in the ground there lived a hobbit. A long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. Luke's not writing a myth. Luke's not writing a fairy tale. Luke is a historian writing down stuff that really happened, and he's trying to get his facts straight. He wants people to know this is what happened in this place. And the thing I love about the Bible does not ask you and I to check our brain at the door. The Bible doesn't ask us to just use our imagination and just for a moment try to imagine. One of the key things that God said that helps me so much, and he said this in Isaiah, he said, come now and let us reason together. Now I know the context is very different with what he was about to say, but the concept is that God doesn't ask you to just always use your imagination. There's facts in this book, and Luke is writing them down. He's writing them down for you and for me, because he wanted future generations to know the certainty of what happened in that place at that time. And we're going to jump down to verse 26. If you're in a Bible, verse 26. Actually, you're in the pew, but if you brought a Bible. Verse 26. In the 6th month of Elizabeth's pregnancy, God sent the angel Gabriel to Nazareth, a town in Galilee. We're familiar with this. To a virgin pledged to be married to a man named Joseph, a descendant of David. The virgin's name was Mary. An amazing name. The story that we are beginning to read and that we're about to read more of and about to allude to is a story that countless thousands of people lost their lives because they believed it. Countless hundreds and maybe thousands more lost their lives throughout the centuries trying to reproduce this story and the bigger story so that the common people could read it in their language. This is a story so significant that people were willing to lay down their lives so that other people could know that it really, really happened. And as Luke is writing this stuff down, I don't think he has any idea the magnitude of what this is going to mean in the future. Of the number of people who are going to read this story, of the number of people who are going to give their lives, some of them even burned at the stake, just so that people could read and know this stuff. And as we sit here in this room today, free to read it, to understand it, and to believe it, I don't think Luke had any idea of what it was going to be like for the people living after him as he wrote these things down. And it's interesting to me that the one being who was sent to share this news with Mary, right there at the beginning, a seemingly random young woman in a rather random place, is the same being who was sent to an aged man in the empire of Babylon or Medo-Persia, depending on which time you think of, an aged, exiled Jewish man wondering when better times would come for his people, a man by the name of Daniel. Same angel spoke to Daniel, spoke to Mary. Now Mary, we don't know a whole lot about her. We've just read her name. We don't know a whole lot about her, though. Our best guess is that she was probably a teenager. And she was living in a place where not a lot of people cared about what happened. She was living at a time when not a lot of people cared about the nation that she was a part of. And she was going to grow up, and she was going to probably get married and raise children and take care of them and take care of the home. And then she would possibly live to see her grandchildren. And then she would die, and no one would really remember her much, and she would be thrown out into the dustbin of history. Just another random life, it would seem. And that was kind of the future that was ahead of Mary previous to the angel showing up to talk to her. Not a whole lot going on there until the angel does show up to talk to her. Listen to verse 28. The angel went to her and said, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." Now forgive me for just a moment. Have you ever had someone say really nice things to you and wondered, what do you want from me? Have you ever had that experience, right? Oh, that was so amazing. Come right over here and let me talk to you. Well, what's on your mind? What are you going to ask me to do, right? We were in San Francisco not too long ago with some good friends of ours, and we were down in the pier area. And as you know, there's lots of people trying to get your attention down there at the pier area. And one of these people was actually shining shoes with some really unique stuff. And he managed to get one of our friends' attention and said, okay. If I can tell you where you got your shoes, will you give me just a minute of your time? Okay, all right. If I can tell you the place where you got your shoes, will you give me just a minute of your time? And I'm thinking, this is going to be interesting to watch, right? He wants something. And so he gives him a minute of his time, and he's thinking, and he says, well, you got your shoes on your feet. And he just reaches down and starts, trying to do the shoe shining. What do you want from me, right? When you're saying all these things, what do you want? The angel comes and he says to her, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." And we can only imagine what Mary must have been feeling. And Luke records a little bit of this because the text says, Mary was greatly troubled at his words and wondered what kind of greeting this might be. Okay, what's about to happen? Because this is all new and I'm not certain about what is about to take place here. Can you imagine how overwhelming that would be for a teenage girl, let alone any of us? What is going on? Now listen to the certainty of the angel's words, verse 30. The angel said to her, "Do not be afraid, Mary." It's often that angels actually have to say these things because that's exactly what we feel. "Do not be afraid, Mary. You have found favor with God. You will conceive and give birth to a son." Very certain. "And you are to call him Jesus." Mary, are you writing this down? This is really important. "He will be called great." He will be great and be called the Son of the Most High. "The Lord God will give him the throne of his father David, and he will reign over Jacob's descendants forever. His kingdom will never have an end." Mary, did you hear the certainty in his words? It's not maybe some of these things are going to happen, Mary, and we're just trying to work it out still. We got some kinks we're trying to work out, but we're going to do our best. The certainty and the purposefulness of the angel's words to her. And there is hope mixed with probably a little bit of skepticism. Because Mary really wants this to happen. The nation of Israel wants this to happen. For Messiah to come and set up his kingdom and to sit on David's throne and to break this oppression. But it's been 500 years since anything like this has happened. Since there was someone on the throne of David. Is it really going to happen? And then Mary asks a really practical question. We may still be trying to wrap our heads around how is this whole kingdom thing going to happen? Mary is an extremely practical young girl. And she heard something that just shocked her a minute ago, and she's got a big question. And I imagine it's a question you would have asked as well. Verse 34, "How will this be?" Mary asked the angel, "since I'm a virgin, and I'm not pregnant, and I'm not married yet. How is this going to happen?" It's a good question. It's a good question. And the next thing that follows, the angel gives her an answer. And it's an answer that we don't linger on too long because we don't fully understand. But this is what he said in as delicate a way as he possibly could. "Mary," verse 35, "the Holy Spirit will come on you, and the power of the Most High will overshadow you. So the Holy One to be born, Son of God." Wow. Even Elizabeth, your relative, is going to have a child in her old age. And she who was said to be unable to conceive is in her 6th month. Mary, I know you're thinking this is crazy, but I'm just telling you, your relative Elizabeth, remember she couldn't have kids? Well, she's going to. She's already in her 6th month, Mary. Just trust me on this one. And his final words in verse 37, and I love this. Why can you trust this? Because no word from God will ever fail. No word from God will ever fail. And then he disappears. Mary's life goes back to normal, or what we might call even worse than normal. if you will remember, and actually you can use your imagination just for a little bit and fill in a few of the details. Imagine a few months down the line, what begins to happen to Mary? Something that some of you have recently experienced. She grew, and she was unmarried. And she was living in a very religious culture as an unmarried young lady, engaged to a man. And that carries with it a whole lot of problems. And you know what her explanation was? Imagine just for how many of you have had a teenage daughter? Or still do. It's okay. How many of you? Okay. You just imagine for a moment that one day you just kind of notice, you're the father, and you just notice that your teenage daughter is just bigger in one place, and you're trying to wrap your head around what happened. And so you kind of just sit her down one day and she says, "Oh, Dad, you're not going to believe this, but an angel showed up and told me," and she tells you the story, right? And you're scratching your head and you're thinking, really? Okay, an angel showed up to you. Really? And that's how this happened? Okay. I think we ought to have some more conversations about this. Now tell me the truth, right? Can you imagine what Mary would have dealt with? She had only one explanation. An angel showed up to me, and this is what he said. Now, there may have been some people who believed it. Her parents may have even believed it. But can you imagine all the people around her, in her city, in her village, in her town? Did you hear about Mary? Yeah, she's just engaged. She's not even married yet. She's pregnant. Mary has to deal with stuff. And she didn't fully understand about all of what that was going to be like. But Mary has to deal with stuff that's not easy. Miss Highly Favored of God. And you can almost just imagine from time to time, and this is a bit of a stretch, but just for a moment, you can almost imagine her saying, "Hey, Angel, would you mind coming back down here, because there's just a whole lot of people that just don't understand. Could you just show up and explain to them what I've been trying to tell them? Because I know they're going to listen to you and they're just not really sure about what I'm saying. Could you just come down and really convince these folks and make my life a little bit easier? Because it's kind of hard to live with this. Now, I'm in for it, but could you just make it a little easier?" And did that angel ever show up? As far as we know from the gospel accounts. No, he never did. And then it gets worse. Herod has this decree that everybody's got to go back to the origin place, and they've got to go through this census experience. And Mary is now well with child. And they've got to go fairly quickly out to Bethlehem. And I've never been pregnant, so I don't know what this is like personally. But can you imagine having to go either by foot, and you're all saying, "Wow, good thing he hasn't." But can you imagine having to go by foot or probably by donkey when you're extremely pregnant for over 70 miles? This is not like riding in a car. 70 miles. Miss Highly Favored of God, traveling to Bethlehem with Joseph. And it takes so long for them to get there that by the time that she does get there, she is ready to give birth to this child. And you would think that the angel would have had it all planned out, her itinerary. Okay, that was really bumpy, but maybe when we get there, he'll hook us up with the suite, right? The birthing suite. And they get there, and you remember, there's no room in the inn. And so she and Joseph head out to the stable with the animals, and that's where she gives birth to this little baby who is called the Son of God. It just seems really random. What's the point of the journey? What's the point of giving birth in an inn? I mean, in the stable and not having a room in the inn? What's going on? Is anybody up there still?
I thought this was going to work out a little nicer. This is not quite how I planned it. And it gets worse still. Because the wise men that show up, they talked to Herod previously. And Herod wants them to come back and tell him exactly where the baby is. Because he's super jealous and he's worried and paranoid about his kingship. And of course they go a different way. And so Herod says, okay, I'll take care of things my way. We're just going to wipe out every baby that's a male, 2 years old and younger. We're just going to kill them all in Bethlehem. And that'll take care of the problem. So the angel shows up to Joseph. And it's most likely very quickly after the birth. Maybe a day or two. And says, Joseph, you take Mary and take this baby and get out of here and head to Egypt because someone is after his life. And so Mary, just giving birth to Jesus, gets back on that donkey, and it's not 70 miles now, it's over 200 miles just to the border of Egypt. And off they go again. Really? This is all in the plan? This is how it was supposed to work out? This just seems so random. And it's not how I planned it. And it gets worse. If you'll remember reading in the Gospel of Matthew, Herod did go through and kill every one of those boys. And if a baby is an infant, have you ever made the mistake of thinking that it was a girl, it was really a boy? You ever made the mistake of thinking it was a boy and it was really a girl? And it's early in the morning and it's kind of dark and they're all wrapped up in their little swaddling clothes. When the soldiers come and break into that house, they're not going to ask, excuse me, is this a boy? They see a baby, they're going to kill it. And so all through the city of Bethlehem, those soldiers walk through that town and they kill all of those infants. And someday Mary's going to learn about what took place in that city. She's going to realize that whereas God showed up to her husband and saved her son, he didn't show up and save all those other ones. And yes, it was because of a king's issue with himself that all of this happened, but it happened because her son was born. And God only saved him. There's all of these things that Mary wonders about and that she has to live with. And she does. And it gets worse. Years later, Mary watches as people don't understand her son. As they disbelieve him for telling the truth and they want to kill him simply for telling the truth. And then one day, she stands outside of that praetorium where they beat her son within an inch of his life. And then she watches as they drag him out and they place a cross on his bleeding shoulders, and she watches as he staggers down that road towards Calvary. And then she watches as he hangs there, ready to die. Is there a purpose? Is there a plan in all of this? Because it's not how I would have planned it. It's not how I wanted it to happen. And remember, this is happening to a woman who is highly favored of God. It seems so random. And the question that would have run through her mind is the same question that runs through your mind when things don't make sense, don't seem to connect. Is God still in this? Is there some bigger picture in all of this that God is working out that I just can't see? The answer is yes. Because at that moment when Jesus hangs on a cross and so many people are thinking, this is just a waste of a great life, which is what the majority of people were thinking. At that very moment, God was working out the biggest purposeful plan in the history of the world to save the human race. And on the surface, it seems so random and it seems like a mistake. But God is working out a bigger purpose for everyone at that very moment in time. He's making salvation available to you, to me, to everyone else in this world. That thing in you that wants to make things make sense, that wants things to work out, that wants the dots to connect, that is in you because you were created in God's image. You don't want life to be random. You want it to make sense. You want there to be purpose. And from the Christmas story, I just got to tell you, even when it seems so random, there's a purpose. Because God is a purposeful God. And it's not promised to be easy. If Miss Highly Favored of God experienced all of those bumps along the way in God's plan, well, I got news for you. You and I are going to experience it too. And it's not always going to be how we would have planned it. You may think right now that you are in an irredeemable situation. Whether that's a tragic illness, separation in a relationship, a prolonged disease, the loss of a job that you loved, problems in a marriage that seemed to have been going so well. And you're probably thinking, can anything good come from this? Can anything good come from this? Is it redeemable in any way? And I honestly have to tell you, I believe that God can bring something good out of what seems so random and not good, if we'll let Him. Paul, in Ephesians, the first chapter, in verse 11, he's writing in retrospect of the events that we have just been looking at. And there's a much bigger context to this, but listen to how he describes what we've been talking about. Verse 11, his letter to the Ephesians. In Him, meaning in Jesus, we were also chosen, having been predestined according to the plan of Him who works out, what's your Bible say if you're there? All things, everything. So let me ask you a question. How much is everything? It's everything. And that's uncomfortable sometimes. Paul says, to the plan of Him who works out everything in conformity with the purpose of His will. There's a purpose. It's not random. And while it may seem like that on the surface, and while there are things about all of this that I don't fully understand, and I don't fully understand why some things happen the way they do, and there's still some element of human choice involved in all this, we serve a purposeful God who works everything out according to His will. Amen. Mary, she didn't know a lot of things when the angel showed up. She didn't know about that donkey ride. She didn't know about giving birth in a stable. She didn't know about Herod. She didn't know about that long donkey ride to Egypt. She didn't know about the pain of watching her son be constantly misrepresented and maligned for telling the truth. She didn't know she was going to watch him die on a cross. She didn't know that she'd have the privilege of watching him rise again. She didn't know about the spread of the story of his life taking over that part of the known world because of what he did. She didn't know that nearly 2,000 years later, you and I would sit in a church and we would meet once, sometimes even twice a week, and people all around this world would meet in his name once or twice a week in a place like this. She had no clue. She didn't understand a lot of things. Listen to what she says. This is her response to the angel. And I hope that whatever you're dealing with and whatever I'm dealing with today, that her response can be our response. It might not be fitting and everything might not be working out exactly as we planned and want it to, but I hope that we can say what she said. And I skipped over this verse on purpose. It's verse 38 of Luke chapter 1. And you know this one. I am the Lord's servant, Mary answered. And in the old King James or in the New King James, may it be to me according to your word. May what you have said come to pass. There's a lot I don't know. I can't see all the future. But I'm here as the Lord's servant. May it be to me according to your word. So what's the conclusion to all this? What's the takeaway for you and I? Mary exhibits something powerful. And it's that little word, thank you. It's a little word called faith. Let me give you a definition that I came across recently. Perfect faith is the faith that moves us to trust God when it seems like He isn't going to be moving. Perfect faith is the faith that moves us to trust God when it seems like He's not working things out as we want Him to. When it seems like life is random, when it seems like the events of our lives are just random and they don't make sense, and it's not lining up. Faith, like Mary had, moves us to trust God and not try to get God to fit into our plans and to get Him to line up the path just how we want it to. But faith says, God, I'm going to let you put me in your plan. Even though right now I don't understand what that is. And even though right now I can't make sense out of what's happening to me. I'm going to trust you anyway. Because I believe that you are a purposeful God. And I believe that you love me. And someday I'm going to understand it. And that may be a year from now, and that may not be till eternity. But I will trust you in the midst of this. You may be in a situation right now where you met just like you thought you would. And you got engaged just like you thought you would. And you got married and it was the marriage that you wanted. And it was beautiful. And you had that child just as you wanted. And life was going along and everything seemed so purposeful and it seemed so planned out and it seemed so great. And then something happened. Whether that was a car accident, whether that was your spouse leaving you for someone else. Maybe that was the death of a child. And all of a sudden, all of that purposefulness and connectedness just seemed to evaporate. And you're living in it right now. You may be in a situation where that job that you so loved evaporated almost overnight. And you are out and you don't know what to do. You may be in a situation where you're not getting any better and you don't know why. Rather than telling God what that plan should look like, what if all of us just said what Mary said. And I'm not saying it's easy. But what if we just said, I'm your servant. You work out that plan in my life as you see fit, and I'll trust you. That's one of the messages of the Christmas story. Not according to my plan, but according to his. That's what Mary showed us. And God makes it possible to live it.